Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's EBC video. We're in Denver, Colorado. We're actually outside the Byron White Courthouse here. It's where the 10th Circuit for the United States Court of Appeals lives and works. Now, the 10th Circuit decides contract cases, among other things, and I was just in there today talking to them, and now we're thinking a little bit about Matthew 20 verses 1 through 16. Before we get started, let me just show you this beautiful building a little bit. Just gorgeous. You can see the Rams down there at the entrance. It's got all this gorgeous facade here. This building is fantastic. As we're thinking about Matthew here now, we're actually looking at a parable of an owner who owns a vineyard, and he's hiring workers during the day. Sounds very contractual so far, right? All right, so what happens is the owner goes out at the beginning of the day and he says, "Come onto my field, I'll pay you a denarius for a day's work." And then at 9 o'clock he says, "Well, let's get some more workers. I'll pay you what's right as well." And then he goes out at noon, and he goes out at 3, and then even at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he goes out and he says, "Let's get some more people. Why aren't you working?" And they say, "Well, no one asked us." "Well, come on out to my field," he says. So then everyone's been working in the field, but some a lot longer than others, right? And so when it's time for everybody to get paid at the end of the day, the landowner says, "All right, let's make sure that the people who came last get paid first, and then we'll pay the people who came at the very first. We'll make sure that they get paid last." And the people who went in at the very first and worked that whole day in the hot scorching sun, those folks are kind of thinking at this point, "I bet it's going to be more than a denarius. This is pretty good," right? And because the landowner starts handing out a denarius to everybody who worked, even if they only worked an hour, now when he gets to the last people, the ones who worked all day, he still only pays them a denarius. And there are some unhappy people here, right? Like, "Hey, how is that fair?" They're thinking. I just love the way they immediately jump to this idea of like, that's not fair, right? And the landowner says something that's still very contractual at the moment. He says, "Well, didn't I promise you a denarius for a day's wage? Why are you complaining? You got exactly what I promised you," right? And then he also says, "Are you just mad because I'm so generous?" Now, pause there for just a moment. There's a last sentence in this reading that says, "So it is that the first will be last and the last will be first," right? And we see that sort of both physically in the sense that the people who came in at the last are now first, and the people who started at the beginning are now last. But we also see that in the sense, right, that there's no one who did more work who's now sort of being set up above everybody else in this setting. This is a fantastic parable, and I think it's all about God's grace, right? We know that we don't do anything to earn God's grace. There isn't enough that we can do that suddenly God will be like, "Yep, you've checked all the boxes. It's time for you to have that grace," right? And that's kind of what this parable is all about. But it's reminding us that there is no earning of God's grace in a very contract-based setting, right? This idea that when that landowner gives that denarius, if you think of that like the grace, that's the promise that God has. That for believing in him, for having Christ die for us, that we're saved. And there's nothing we're going to do that's going to earn it. But don't we kind of do the thing that all those hard-working first laborers do sometimes? Don't we sort of think, "Hey, you know, I was really pretty good this week, and I did go to church, and, you know, I was kind to people, I gave away a little bit of money, right? I really feel like I've been earning it this week," right? We get that sense, and then we maybe we have a tendency to look at other people and be like, they're not doing it quite the way they should, right? So we're thinking about those things and thinking that, like, there really is a way in which we're kind of earning our keep here with God. Well, it's not happening. It doesn't happen, right? We know, based on this parable, that the promise is there, and it's so great that God's going to give it to all of us, no matter how much work we're doing, just for believing in Jesus, just for being able to accept Christ as the Savior who died for us. So this week, everybody, as you're going about your week, have a great time. Just know that you're not earning any of that grace. And by the way, you know, have a soft heart for people around you as well. Look out for them and do great deeds. We'll see you later. Thanks, everybody.